Passive learning equates limited learning. How many times have you heard people ask that? And it is true. It does lead to limited learning. So what is passive learning? It is simply the process by which students are going to receive information or knowledge from a teacher or instructor without any input, participation, or even feedback. The best example of passive learning comes from the campuses of higher education. Think of the traditional lecture hall. The professor, the beholder of all knowledge, stands at the front of a large lecture hall and is going to distribute his wisdom, while the students are expected to sit quietly and simply listen and take notes. Active learning is quite different from this model of passive learning. Active learning demands feedback. It requires attention and participation. The model of active learning is going to promote and develop critical thinking skills that are not developed within that passive learning model. So some examples of active learning may be case studies, annotated reading, learning journals, reflective learning, brainstorming, discussion, debates, peer reviews. Active learning activities can also be divided into different sizes. For instance, you can do an active learning activity as an individual, a team, a small group, pairs, and even in large group settings. There are situations in which passive learning is a viable option for instructors and for learning. It is the best option when attempting to cover a large amount of information quickly. It will allow the teacher to share information that may not be published or available yet. It also allows the instructor to develop instructional materials and to prepare in advance. The instructor knows what to expect, whereas in many situations, including active learning options, they become unpredictable because you don't know what the feedback is or the participation or even if the students will participate. Passive learning is also a good option when there are many students who need to know the information. Remember that if you choose to use a passive learning to disseminate information quickly, that you should follow it up with an active learning experience. Why? Because the retention level of information from passive learning is very, very low. The University of Massachusetts Boston says that studies have shown that the amount of information retained after a learning event decreases rapidly if not quickly applied and practical. And as you can see in our chart, the lecture, which is a passive reading experience or a passive learning experience, actually has the lowest retention rate at only 5%. So how do you avoid passive learning? Even if you must use a traditional passive means for teaching, recall that you can simply add probing questions to generate thought processes. Questions can not only promote deeper learning, but they can also pull the students back to the topic. Remember that just if you must use passive learning, you do not need to be bland about it. Create an engaging passive learning environment. Instead of being just a dud on the stage, be the sage on the stage. Make it engaging, make it fun, make it dynamic.